Ever wondered what it was really like to be a Viking? Forget the glory of battle. Tonight, we're diving into the brutally mundane daily life of a shield maiden. Imagine waking up to a longhouse smelling of wet fur, boiled cabbage, and a drunk midwife. No plush toys, no pacifiers, just endless chores and the constant threat of starvation. This isn't Hollywood's version of Vikings. This is how you actually would have lived, if you survived childhood at all. Your Viking morning began with the stench of wet sheep and yesterday's cabbage stew. That's what greeted you in a longhouse before sunrise. Picture a building about 60 feet long, not quite a football field, but big enough to cram in your entire extended family. A few cows, some chickens, and years' worth of smoke stains on the ceiling. The walls leaned inward slightly, built from whatever trees grew nearby, packed with mud and animal dung to keep the winter wind out. You'd find no separate rooms here, just one long space where everyone ate, slept, argued, and smelled each other's laundry. Privacy wasn't a concept they worried about. Your great-uncle snored 3 feet away while your cousin butchered a goat by the doorway. The central hearth pumped out heat and smoke in equal measure. You'd wake up with soot in your nostrils and a permanent cough. They built these houses with smoke holes in the roof, but when it rained, those had to be covered, turning the whole place into a smoky sauna. Your eyes watered constantly, and good luck finding a clean handkerchief. Animals lived right inside with you. Come winter, you'd share your floor space with chickens, maybe a cow or two for extra warmth. The stink of manure mixed with wood smoke created a signature scent no modern candle company would dare reproduce. But those animals were lifelines. Their body heat kept the place above freezing. Their milk and meat kept you alive. You just learned to ignore the flies and the occasional chicken wandering over your sleeping mat. Building one of these took the whole village. They'd fell trees with iron axes, notch the beams to fit together, then pack the gaps with whatever would stick. The roof used layers of sod, basically dirt and grass, which worked great for insulation, but leaked like a sieve when it rotted. Imagine lying in bed, listening to drips hit strategically placed buckets all night. No nails either, just wooden pegs holding everything together. When the wind howled, the whole structure groaned like an old ship. That central hearth never went cold. It cooked your meals, dried your clothes, and kept frostbite at bay. But it demanded constant attention. Someone had to feed it logs around the clock. Miss a shift, and you'd wake up to ice crystals forming on the inside walls. Cooking happened right there in the smoke, with pots hanging from iron chains. No temperature control, no timers. You learned to gauge heat by how fast your eyebrows singed. Modern houses have separate rooms, windows that open, and vents that don't rely on random gaps in the roof. Vikings made do with what they had. The women especially. When the men were off raiding or trading, they kept these places running with brutal efficiency. They knew exactly when to rotate the straw bedding, how to bank the fire for all-night heat, which cracks to stuff with moss before the first snowfall. Your comfort depended on their knowledge of smoke patterns and drafty corners. Ventilation was an ongoing experiment. They'd prop open doors, adjust smoke hole covers, even hang damp furs to catch some of the airborne soot. Smart longhouse designs angled the roof to encourage airflow, but physics usually won out. In summer, you might get some relief by sleeping outside. Come winter, you just accepted that every piece of clothing would smell like a campfire forever. The work never stopped. Someone always needed to grind grain, mend tools, or chase that one chicken that got loose again. You slept when you could, ate what was available, and tried not to think about how much simpler life would be with solid walls and a chimney. Next time you complain about doing dishes, remember your Viking counterpart scrubbing cookware with sand and ashes while dodging livestock. And that was before breakfast. Up next, how they survived winters that made modern cold snaps look like spring break. Because when the snow piled up, hunger became a sharper enemy than any rival warrior. Forget the thermostat. You'd be calculating whether the remaining turnips would last until thaw. Winter in a Viking village wasn't just cold. It was a life or death countdown. Imagine months where the sun barely showed up, where rivers froze solid, and every storm could mean the difference between eating or starving. Scandinavian winters dropped temperatures low enough to flash freeze exposed skin. Your breath crystallized in the air the second you stepped outside, and firewood became more precious than silver. You'd wake to the same question every morning. Had the food stores held overnight? Rats and mold didn't take breaks. Each barrel of grain, each hanging joint of meat represented hours of labor and careful planning. One bad calculation, and your family would be chewing on boiled bark by spring. They stored food carefully. Smoked fish hanging from rafters, vegetables buried in cool earth, dairy products sealed in wooden containers. But nothing lasted forever, and hunger gnawed at the edges of daily life, long before the thaw arrived. Chopping wood was agony. Your axe handle stuck to bare hands, the impact of each swing jolting up frozen arms. A single longhouse needed mountains of firewood just to stay above freezing. You'd fell trees in autumn, but splitting logs in deep snow with numb fingers turned simple work into torture. Blisters froze before they could heal. And still, you kept swinging, because stopping meant watching your breath fog inside the house. Clothing was armor against the cold, but not like modern gear. Layers of wool, stitched tight with bone needles, trapped body heat without stopping the wind entirely. No synthetic fabrics, no moisture-wicking technology, just thick, scratchy cloth that stank after weeks of wear. Leather boots lined with fur helped, but wet snow seeped through seams eventually. Frostbite wasn't a risk. It was inevitable if you lingered outside too long. They monitored supplies like battlefield generals. Each week, someone checked the grain bins, ran fingers over smoked meat to test for rot, counted remaining wheels of cheese. Children weren't allowed near the storage areas. Too risky. One dropped torch or curious nibble could wipe out half the winter's food. Portions shrank as weeks passed, meals becoming watery stews stretched with whatever scraps remained. Modern winters are inconveniences. Thermostats click on before you feel a chill. Grocery stores stock pyramids of imported produce year-round. Vikings had none of that. If stores ran low, you didn't order takeout. You starved or begged neighbors, assuming they had extras. And neighbors remembered debts. Come spring, that borrowed sack of barley might cost you a goat or your best axe. Preservation methods were brutal, but ingenious. Meat submerged in barrels of sour whey, fermented slowly, creating a Viking version of pickled survival food. Fish dried on wooden racks until hard as boards, needing to be pounded with rocks before cooking. Even butter got packed into boxes and buried in bogs, where cold peat acted like a natural refrigerator. Nothing went to waste. Bones became broth, gristle got rendered into glue, and fish eyeballs were considered snacks. Smoking wasn't just for meat. Hollowed-out logs placed near the hearth let them dry grains slowly, keeping mold at bay. Herbs hung in bunches from the ceiling, their oils preserving potency for medicines. Salt was gold. rubbed into cuts of meat, sprinkled over fish, even used to barter when coins were scarce. Every technique bought a few more weeks before hunger set in. The darkest months were exercises in endurance. Families huddled near the hearth, sharing body heat. Stories got longer, tempers shorter. You'd dream of spring greens while chewing on leathery strips of last autumn's mutton. Everyone lost weight. Babies stopped crying as much, not because they weren't hungry, but because they lacked energy to wail. Yet they survived. Passed down knowledge told them when to eat the last good apple, how to thaw frozen milk without curdling it, which tree bark could be boiled into weak tea. Children learned young to lick icicles for water rather than waste fuel-melting snow. Old tricks, like packing hay between wall planks for insulation, made the difference between discomfort and death. Spring's arrival felt like resurrection. That first drip from the roof, first patch of bare ground, first thin bird returning, all signaled the famine season's end. But before fresh greens sprouted, there was one last hurdle, the starving time. Stores were exhausted, new growth not yet ready. This was when villages truly tested their planning. Those who'd rationed well celebrated. Others didn't. Then came the first fresh fish, the first tender shoots pried from half-frozen soil. Food regained flavor. Bodies that had been clenched tight against cold finally relaxed. Winter wasn't just survived, it was defeated again, same as last year, same as next. All that remained were the lessons. Dry more fish, store more grain, chop more wood. Because 6 months from now, the cold would return, hungrier than ever. Up next, why that stale loaf of bread you threw out last week would have been a Viking's treasure. Forget slicing neatly. You'd be fighting tooth and nail just to chew it. That stale loaf of bread in your cupboard, to a Viking, it would have been worth its weight in silver. Every meal began months before eating, with back-breaking labor just to grow the grain. The Viking diet wasn't fancy. Barley, oats, rye, and whatever vegetables survived the short growing season. Meat was rare, except after successful hunts or autumn slaughters. But bread was the foundation, the difference between a full stomach and gnawing hunger. Start with planting. No tractors, no seed drills, just an iron-tipped wooden stick to poke holes in the dirt. You'd walk bent double across fields, dropping seeds by hand while birds waited to steal them. Kids chased off pests with sticks until their arms ached. Rainfall decided your fate. Too little and crops withered. Too much and rot set in. Whole families knelt to weed between rows, fingernails packed with soil that never quite washed out. Harvest meant swinging a sickle all day under the late summer sun. Blisters burst on palms as you gathered stalks into bundles. One slip and you'd slice your leg instead of barley. Then came threshing, beating the sheaves with sticks to loosen grain, a chore that left shoulders burning and dust coating your throat. Winnowing came next, tossing everything into the wind so lighter chaff blew away while heavier kernels fell to the ground. Do it wrong and half your food supply scattered across the mud. Now the real work began. That sack of grain needed grinding before becoming flour. Forget electric mills. Vikings used quernstones, 2 heavy rocks you cranked by hand for hours. The bottom stone stayed still while you rotated the top one, crushing grain between them. It took 2 hours to grind enough flour for one family's daily bread. Your arms shook with fatigue, while grit from the stones mixed with sweat on your skin. Miss a stroke, and you might lose fingers caught between the grinding surfaces. Women dominated this task, squatting for hours at the quern. Skirts became gray with stone dust that never fully washed out. They developed permanent grooves in their thumbnails from pressing against the grindstone's handle. Children helped when strong enough, learning through exhaustion how to maintain a steady rhythm. Songs and stories passed the time, but the labor never eased. Baking was a communal event. Villages often shared a single clay oven to conserve fuel. You'd shape dough into flat rounds while waiting your turn at the hearth. No measuring cups or timers. Experience told you when the consistency looked right. Fire management was key. Too hot and bread charred. Too cool and it stayed doughy inside. Women swapped tips while nursing burns from reaching into the oven's mouth. The bread itself was dense, dark, and packed with bits of millstone grit that wore down teeth over time. No fluffy modern loaves here. This stuff could crack a plate if dropped. Fresh bread was a luxury. Usually you ate day-old slabs soaked in broth to soften them. Even spoiled loaves weren't wasted. Molded bread got scraped and repurposed as thickener for stews. They maximized every scrap of grain. Stalks left after threshing became animal bedding or roof thatch. Husks mixed with water made a weak beer. Failed crops were still harvested. Blighted grain might taste bitter, but hunger outweighed disgust. Fields rotated yearly to prevent soil exhaustion, with livestock fertilizing fallow plots. It was a system refined through desperation. Waste meant winter starvation. Crop storage became an art form. Grain pits lined with birch bark kept harvests dry underground. Some villagers coated seed stalks in urine to deter rodents. The ammonia smell repelled pests. They selected the plumpest seeds for next year's planting, hands moving swiftly to sort before winter damp spoiled the lot. Iron tools changed everything. Before them, farming meant digging with antler picks and wooden spades. A good iron plowshare could turn soil twice as fast, but only wealthier families owned one. Others borrowed or bartered labor for its use, adding more debt to the endless cycle of planting and harvest. The rhythm dictated life. Spring planting, summer weeding, autumn reaping, winter grinding, each season tied to food production. Even small children had roles, scaring birds or gathering dropped kernels. Nobody escaped the work. Elders too stiff for fieldwork patched grain sacks or mended tools by firelight. Modern supermarkets would have seemed like sorcery to them. Today, we buy flour scooped by machines, baked in factories, wrapped in plastic, all without a single sore muscle. Vikings sacrificed bodies daily just to chew their meals. That morning toast you barely think about? Someone's ancestor literally broke their back to invent it. Up next, the animals that shared your home weren't pets. They were noisy, ill-tempered co-workers. Try milking a goat that's stepping on your foot while chickens peck at your lunch. At least the flies were consistent companions. Those animals in your Viking village weren't pets. They were your smelly, demanding roommates who happened to provide breakfast. Goats, sheep, and cows walked a fine line between asset and nuisance. Lose them to disease, and your family starved by spring. Keep them healthy, and you spent half your day wrestling them out of trouble. There was no winning, only surviving their constant needs. Winter turned animal care into a high-stakes game. When snow buried the grazing fields, those hungry mouths still needed feeding. Preparation started in summer. You cut hay with iron sickles until your hands cramped, stacked it in dripping piles, prayed it would dry before rotting. Storage became vital. Uncovered hay meant dead livestock come February. Some dug pits lined with stones to keep forage dry. Others built raised platforms that mice couldn't reach. Every family had tricks, but winter always lasted longer than the preparations. The longhouse became a barn for half the year. Imagine sharing your bedroom with an irritable cow that stepped on your cloak every morning. Animals packed together along the walls. their body heat helping against the cold. Their stink permeated everything. Wool blankets reeked of manure no matter how much you beat them clean. Chickens roosted in the rafters, dropping feathers into the cooking pot. Goats nibbled on anything left unattended, including the toddler's shoes. You learned to sleep through the symphony of bleats, moos, and the occasional panicked squawk when someone rolled over onto a rooster. Milking happened twice daily, regardless of weather. You'd crouch beside a shaggy cow in the gray dawn light, fingers stiff with cold tugging at frozen udders. Icicles hung from the animal's belly, snapping off when she shifted. One kick from a restless hoof could spill the entire pail, a disaster when every drop counted. Children often handled the goats, their small hands better suited to the task. They'd return with chapped cheeks and stories of stubborn nannies who'd stepped in the milk bucket again. Disease could wipe out a village's livelihood in weeks. No veterinarians meant relying on watchfulness and folk remedies. A cow coughing too often might get separated, her milk boiled before drinking. Some rubbed onion poultices on swollen udders or fed ale to constipated pigs. When odd lumps appeared on sheep, you isolated the flock fast, though by then it was usually too late. Bad years saw entire herds lost to moraine, their corpses dragged far from home to avoid spreading sickness. The stench lingered for weeks. Modern farms have antibiotics, vaccinations, dewormers. Vikings had observation and desperation. They noticed which animals thrived in harsh winters and bred those first. Hardy northern cattle with thick hides got preference over sleeker southern varieties. Goats that didn't eat poisonous plants survived to produce kids. It was crude selective breeding, but it worked well enough to keep lineages alive through generations. Keeping herds intact required harsh choices. Weak calves got slaughtered early to conserve milk for humans. Aggressive rams that injured others became stew meat. Breeding happened on strict schedules. Too early, and the newborns froze. Too late, and they'd starve before spring grass grew. Animals were investments, not companions. Even favorites ended up as winter meat when times got desperate. Sheep demanded special handling. Their wool meant endless work, shearing, washing, spinning, but also warm clothes. You couldn't let them get too thin, or the fleece grew brittle. Yet fat sheep ate more hay than the family could spare. Finding balance meant rotating grazing areas constantly, moving herds between rocky hillsides and sheltered valleys. Dogs helped, but mostly it was children running until their legs ached, driving stubborn ewes away from mud pits and bramble thickets. Mismanagement meant disaster. A lazy shepherd might overlook early signs of hoof rot until half the flock limped. Rats nested in poorly stored grain, contaminating next season's feed. Stories circulated about entire villages lost after losing animals, people reduced to eating bark before the thaw. Smart communities traded livestock to diversify bloodlines, bartering a good milking goat for 2 promising lambs. Odd tricks improved survival rates. Some rubbed fish oil on cow udders to prevent frostbite. Others tied bells on led sheep so storms wouldn't separate the flock. Barn owls were encouraged to nest in storage areas. Their appetite for mice saved precious grain. The best herders could predict weather by watching how goats crowded together or when pigs gathered sticks before storms. Ultimately, the animals outnumbered the humans and required more daily labor. While men hunted or traded, women and children managed the ceaseless grind of feeding, cleaning, and breeding. There were no days off when a pregnant ewe might lamb early or a fox threatened the hens. Every decision carried weight. Slaughter the injured calf now or risk infection spreading. Give extra hay to the milk cow or let the breeding ram eat first. The payoff came in steady drips. A pail of milk, a skein of yarn, a hide slowly tanning in ash. Not glamorous, but enough to keep people alive until the next summer's bounty. And when times got truly lean, those animals became the last barrier between survival and starvation. No Viking ever took a full belly for granted, not when they'd spent mornings knee-deep in mud, pulling a stuck heifer from the pond. Speaking of mud, let's talk Viking hygiene, or rather, the shocking lack of it. Forget daily showers. These folks considered hand-washing optional and shared bathwater with half the village. The stench alone could knock out a modern nose at 20 paces. Your Viking Saturday bath was less about relaxation and more about scraping off layers of grime. Forget soaking in bubbles. Your weekly wash happened in a wooden tub with water everyone else had already used. Cleanliness wasn't about smelling nice. It was about not attracting lice or infections. You'd go days or weeks between proper baths, wiping yourself down with damp cloths in between. The Saturday bath ritual was sacrosanct, though. Vikings believed in Logardagur, literally washing day. Whole families took turns in the same water, starting with the head of household. The water got progressively murkier, with kids bathing last in what resembled thin soup. Neighbors might join in, turning it into a social event. People exchanged news while waiting their turn, making it as much about community as cleanliness. You didn't have soap as we know it. Instead, they used a paste of ashes and animal fat that stung the eyes but cut through grease. Hair washing involved vigorous scrubbing with this mixture, leaving strands brittle but lice-free. Combs were precious personal items, carved from antler or bone with teeth close enough together to drag out nits. Finding one in an archaeological dig usually means its owner valued it enough to carry daily. Men and women cared about grooming despite the difficulties. Beards were trimmed with small knives, though neatness mattered less than practicality. Women braided hair tightly to keep it manageable between washes. Both sexes used bone picks to clean teeth. Archaeologists find worn grooves in Viking teeth from this daily habit. They rubbed herbs on their gums to freshen breath, knowing even then that rotting teeth could kill you. Communal hot springs were luxury when available. In Iceland and some Norse settlements, natural geothermal pools became bathing hubs. These were rare oases where you could actually get clean without 50 other people's filth floating around you. Wealthier Vikings might have servants heat water over fires for private baths, but most made do with the shared tub in the longhouse corner. Body odor was a fact of life. Without deodorant, people rubbed themselves with herbs like mint or thyme. Clothes absorbed sweat until they could stand on their own. Wool naturally resists some smells, but even Vikings noticed when someone skipped too many washing days. The sagas mention characters being recognized by their distinctive stench as much as their appearance. Underwear didn't exist as we know it. Men wore linen loincloths that got washed rarely. Women's underdresses were linen too, but they layered enough wool over them that the smell stayed somewhat contained. In winter, no one changed clothes for weeks. The cold justified keeping on every layer. You'd develop a personal aroma that announced your arrival before you spoke. Hand washing happened more often, mostly before meals. A basin of water sat near the eating area, but it wasn't changed constantly. You rinsed your hands and face, trying to ignore the floating bits from the last user. Table manners emphasized communal eating from shared bowls anyway, so everyone's germs mixed freely. Foot hygiene was basic. Leather shoes stuffed with hay or wool absorbed sweat until they rotted. Going barefoot in summer led to cracked heels that caught dirt. Some Vikings soaked feet in warm water with herbs to soften calluses, but most just lived with leathery soles that could walk over sharp rocks without flinching. Children got wiped down more often than adults, mostly because they played in mud constantly. Mothers used damp cloths to clean faces and hands multiple times a day, especially before meals. Babies were washed in small wooden bowls, their cloth diaper strips rinsed and reused until frayed beyond repair. The wealthy had slightly better options. Traders might import expensive soaps from the Middle East, scented with rare oils. Silver ear scoops cleaned wax without risking damage from makeshift tools. Some high-status graves contained tiny spoons for cleaning under fingernails, the Viking equivalent of a manicure set. Despite the challenges, Vikings weren't dirty by choice. They simply lacked resources we take for granted. When traveling to Constantinople or other advanced cities, Norse traders marveled at public bathhouses. Back home, they did their best with what they had, knowing that smelling bad was better than dying from infected cuts. Medical practices revolved around this reality. Healers treated wounds with honey as a disinfectant, knowing even dirty honey helped more than nothing. They advised cleaning injuries with boiled water when possible. Some recognized that foul smells signaled disease, though they blamed miasmas rather than bacteria. Your modern bathroom would seem like magic to them. Hot water appearing instantly at a knob's turn. Soap that lathers without burning. Towels cleaned after each use. Unimaginable luxuries. Yet they stayed as clean as circumstances allowed, because even Vikings knew that somewhere beneath the layers of sweat and smoke, being human meant occasionally washing off the grime. Speaking of health, surviving childhood in a Viking village was its own brutal challenge. Between questionable hygiene and non-existent vaccines, simple scrapes could turn deadly overnight. When that happened, families turned to remedies that involved more guesswork than science. That cut on your finger wasn't just annoying, it could kill you in Viking times. Without antibiotics or clean bandages, even minor injuries spiraled into deadly infections. Broken bones healed crooked or not at all. Fevers meant guessing which herb might help before the patient died. Medicine wasn't a science yet. It was trial and error with high stakes. Wise women handled most health care. They weren't witches, just the daughters and granddaughters of women who'd memorized which plants stopped bleeding or eased diarrhea. Every village had at least one. You'd visit her hut clutching whatever payment you could scrape together. Maybe eggs, maybe a scrap of cloth. Her shelves held dried plants, bowls of paste, and jars of mystery liquids that smelled worse than spoiled milk. Herbal knowledge was everything. Yarrow leaves crushed into wounds helped clotting. Willow bark tea eased pain, centuries before aspirin duplicated its effect. Honey packed into infections sometimes worked better than expected, though no one knew why. Mint settled upset stomachs. Garlic might fight evil spirits or just mask the taste of rotting food. Diagnoses involved lots of guesswork. That headache could be stress or brain swelling or a demon. The wise woman felt your forehead, checked your urine color, maybe threw some bones for good measure. Treatment often combined practical steps with rituals, chewing specific roots while chanting to Odin for strength. When it worked, no one cared which part had actually helped. Some treatments were horrifically logical. Need to drain an abscess? Heat a knife tip red hot and poke carefully. Arrow stuck in flesh? Slide a hollow reed down the shaft before pulling to prevent worse tearing. Concussion? Darkness and quiet. They got that much right. But then there were the questionable calls, like drinking water used to wash a corpse to cure jaundice. Spiritual healing carried equal weight. Charms carved on sticks invoked gods for protection. Runes scratched onto drinking horns allegedly purified contents. Some healers slept with problems under their pillows, hoping dreams would bring answers. A bad omen might delay treatment entirely. No one scheduled surgery when ravens flew left to right. Surgery happened awake and aware. No anesthesia beyond strong mead and a leather strap to bite. Imagine having a tooth pulled while someone held your head steady. Bone setting involved yanking limbs straight with crude traction devices. Amputations meant holding still through the sound of your own flesh being sawed. Many chose death over that ordeal. Childbirth blended all these approaches. Midwives used herbs to ease labor pains while chanting protective spells. They knew how to turn breech babies by feel, but couldn't stop hemorrhaging mothers from bleeding out. Newborns passed through smoke for purification before being rubbed with salt, which probably killed some bacteria, along with being excruciating for the infant. Dental care was medieval in every sense. Chewing sticks scraped off plaque until teeth wore down to stumps. Toothaches meant either yanking the offender out with pliers or packing the cavity with beeswax. A temporary fix at best. Archaeologists find Viking skulls with teeth filed down from grinding, their version of a night guard. Preventative medicine barely existed. They didn't connect cleanliness to health beyond noticing stinky wounds festered faster. Some cultures bathed more, but Vikings mostly relied on tough constitutions. Kids developed immunity by surviving childhood diseases, or didn't develop anything at all because they died. Mental health treatment was non-existent. Depression meant being labeled cowardly. Epilepsy might get you called God-touched or demon-possessed, depending on the day's mood. Everyone expected nightmares after battles. You dealt with them by drinking until you passed out. Some practices accidentally worked. Storing butter in peat bogs kept it fresh longer. The cold, acidic environment prevented bacterial growth. Souring milk into skyr created probiotics before anyone knew what bacteria were. Even their bad-smelling fermented fish provided vitamin D during sunless winters. Wound care was surprisingly advanced when it worked. They stitched cuts with animal gut thread and covered them with spider webs, nature's sterile dressing. Burn victims got smeared with onion paste that may have had mild antibiotic effects. Poultices of moldy bread occasionally fought infections, foreshadowing penicillin. Medical tools were basic but functional. Tweezers removed splinters and arrowheads. Probes cleaned wounds. Scalpels existed for surgeries, though sterilization meant wiping them on a least dirty cloth. Bone drills relieved pressure under skull fractures, a terrifying last resort. Records show Viking healers traveling far to learn new techniques. Some studied with Arab physicians who'd preserved Greek medical texts. Others traded remedies with Sami shamans or English monks. The best adapted ideas into their own practices. Herbs from the south mixed with northern spellcraft. Failure carried consequences. A dead patient might mean the healer paid weregild, blood money, to the family. Some were outlawed after too many corpses piled up. Others gained reputations for odd successes, like the healer who staunched bleeding by stuffing wounds with particular moss. Modern medicine would seem like magic to them. Sterile bandages that prevent infection, pills that banish pain, germ theory explaining why washing hands matters. They'd call it sorcery. Effective sorcery worth paying for, but sorcery nonetheless. Vikings respected results wherever they came from. Healing was always uncertain. You might walk away cured or die choking on your own blood. Patients clutched amulets while swallowing bitter brews, hoping combination would be enough. Sometimes it was. Often it wasn't. Survival depended as much on luck as skill. Midwives faced the highest stakes. Bringing life into Viking villages meant confronting death daily and being blamed when things went wrong. Their knowledge passed mouth to ear until some was lost, some distorted, some accidentally perfected. Every childbirth was a gamble where the house always won eventually. Speaking of childbirth, if you thought Viking medicine was rough, wait until you hear about their parenting techniques. That swaddling blanket was likely the only soft thing your child would encounter for years. But the real shock is what came next. And trust me, you'll want to hear it in part 2. So hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on the bell, because the next chapter of Viking life will blow your mind.